Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today, and thank you also for the eScriptorium team, because although I'm standing here now presenting, there's very much a big team behind me, and you can see from the slide and from the website the other contributors to this big project. So I'm going to be presenting eScriptorium today, mainly through videos to keep things a bit more efficient in terms of time and to avoid any issues there. But if you want, I can certainly show you some live demonstrations after if you want to contact me directly. So what are we talking about here? Well, eScriptorium fundamentally is a project about HTR, Handwritten Text Recognition. In other words, you have your documents, your manuscripts, whatever they are, you have images of those manuscripts, documents, and you want to get text out so that you can use it in addition, you can search it, you can do whatever you want with it. That's fundamentally what we're talking about here. It's essentially the same thing as OCR, so you can use this equally well for printed. It's by no means limited to manuscripts. And this framework is designed to do this for you, or at least help you as much as possible. And ultimately, the goal is to do most of it automatically, which is what we'll be seeing. One of the interesting things about eScriptorium, particularly for religious studies, is that being at the EPHE, the École Pratique des Hautes Études, you have colleagues working in pretty much every type of script and writing system that you can possibly imagine. So as much as possible, we're really trying to accommodate that. And I'll talk a little bit about at the end about some of the challenges that are related here. So what does this look like? How does it actually work in practice? Well, it's useful, I think, to know, although it's not that important for the average user, that there are two different pieces that we've put together here. So on the one hand, we have Kraken, which is the engine for the HTR, the bit that actually does the transcription, which is very modular. It's written in Python. It's a standalone unit. It's very, very flexible and very powerful. So you can do a lot of things with it. It can handle a very wide range of different cases. And you can, if you want, even customize it, intervene, change a lot of settings and so forth. This is developed by my colleague, Ben Kiesling. It's essentially his work and works extremely well. The catch is, though, it's not particularly user-friendly for the average humanities researcher. So you're trained in religious studies, you've already spent a huge amount of time and effort learning that. You probably don't really want to then have to turn around and learn a whole different system in addition. And this is the idea of eScriptorium. So this essentially is a web interface on top of Kraken that allows you to access it much more easily. If you need something more advanced, then you can go directly to Kraken, or you can use a combination. This is the point, to make the most common things very easy to do, although still giving the possibility for you to go directly and work further from there. So what is the basic workflow then? Well, this is standard for pretty much all systems. If you've worked with any others, Transcribus or Occupus or whatever, you'll be familiar essentially with how this works. First of all, you have to get the images in from somewhere. So maybe you have a IIIF manifest. I'll show you in a second what that is if you're not familiar with it. Maybe you have images on your own laptop, whatever. You obviously need to load them into the system to begin with. You then need to segment the images. And by segment, what I really mean is finding the different parts of the page. So finding the lines of text. And probably you may well have decoration, dropped capitals, running headers, page numbers, all kinds of other things that you may want to treat differently. And so you may well want automatically or manually to find those as well in order to structure and work with your document. And the way this normally works in practice is that you can do this manually to begin with. You can then train the machine to do it itself for you. And you may well want to correct, you probably need to correct those results. So this is what the interface here is helping and allowing you to do relatively easily. So it may well be you have something that you need to repeat, go through repeated stages, getting better each time as you go. You would then presumably want to transcribe the text. That's generally the purpose here. And again, you can start with this manually typing it out through eScriptorium. You can do it automatically, doing the automatic using the HTR engine and then correcting it. There may be retraining. Or if you have a text already, you can import it. And at the end, you can export your text, and you can also export your models, which is definitely crucial here and is something I will come back to later. It's important to emphasize too that although we are working to have models, to have systems that will work for a wide range of different things, it's generally, unless you have very standard manuscripts, it's generally unlikely that you'll be able to just simply click a button and get a perfect result. Manuscripts are complicated things. That's why we're interested in them, right? That's why we're working with them. So by definition, it's not going to be easy to get a simple result unless you have a very straightforward document. But what you can do is start with something that's already in place, improve it, train it for your specific content, and then after that, you should be able to go a long way in having all these different manuscripts automatically transcribed for you. So let's have a look at what it looks like, how it works a bit. But first, just to mention some of the things that are in place at the moment. And in particular, this is very much a work in progress. We've been going for a couple of years already, with Cartha much longer, and we recently got some new funding to take this a good deal further. But to give you an idea of what we can do, first, there are different forms of importing from AAAF, PDF, image files, alt-page XML. These are slightly more technical things, but you can also import already trained models from elsewhere, which is very useful, as we'll see, and something that I think possibly is unique for these platforms. So we have an ergonomic UI in place, which we're going to see in a second, which does the automatic segmentation based on user-defined ontologies, typologies of regions, and so on. Automatic transcriptions according to the principles set by the user, again an important point, export, and also a powerful and growing API, which means that if it doesn't do exactly what you want already, it's relatively easy for you to customize, to write your own code that interacts with it and that works with that. So let me start here. This is, as you can see, Biblissima. This is not eScriptorium. This is not our project. It's a different project that's done by colleagues, which is a collection, as you can see, using AAAF, an international standard, to bring together images of manuscripts and books across different libraries. So this is just one collection of, as you can see, nearly 80,000 digitized manuscripts and books that exist already. Why am I showing you this? Because this starts to give you some idea of the possibilities with something like eScriptorium. That if you have it available in AAAF, you can, in principle, start transcribing thousands, tens of thousands, millions of pages, combining AAAF and connecting it to eScriptorium and other approaches. So again, how do we do this? Well, here we have an example, a video which I can use. So I go into eScriptorium, I create my new document. It's from AAAF one. I put in some basic metadata for the moment. I'm keeping this deliberately very minimal. And then I can go and import my images. So if I want to use AAAF, for example, I go over here to the Biblissima site or any other AAAF repository. I find the manuscript that I want. I get my AAAF link. I simply drag it across and click Start. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit just for time, but automatically I go and have my cup of coffee or whatever it is, and the images start appearing, being brought in through AAAF. After I've done that, I might have something like this, for instance, and then I want to start marking the regions, so the sections of text and so forth. So how do I do that in practice? I can select my images, and to begin with, I can try the default automatic segmenter. So I click on Segment. I can upload a model if I have one, or I can select one that's already there. A few other things I can do there, and I click Segment. And I wait a little bit, but here's one I prepared earlier, as they say. And if we have a look, there are the results. So these are the uncorrected results, straight as they've come out of the automatic segmentation. Here you can see the results are not quite so good. It had problems with the decoration, so no problem. I can adjust that manually. It's not surprising he had these results. It's never seen this manuscript. It's never seen this style of decoration before. It doesn't really understand what it is. So no problem. I use the interface to correct, to take out the bits that shouldn't be there. And again, let me speed that up a little. In this way, using the interface, I can get a good result. Next page, similar thing. It detected the text pretty well in general, but it did recognize the decoration. It did think the decoration was script. So again, I can use these tools quickly and easily to take that out and get a nice result and check the other pages. So this is what I mean. You can do it, start it automatically, correct it for your material, and then as we'll see, we can go and retrain it. Once I have a pretty good layout, I can then start thinking about the transcription. So here, for example, I can click and I can start typing out my transcription if I don't have one already. It's up to me what standards I want to use. I can use a transliteration if it's a non-Latin script, abbreviations as we have here. I've decided to put them in square brackets, but in principle, within certain limits, you can use whatever form of transcription you want here. And so I can type out line by line if that's what's best suited to what I'm doing. Or there are a few other options. So for instance, I can click here. So this is this fourth button, and then I could, for instance, cut and paste the text if I have it already directly rather than going through line by line. Here's another example just to show you some of the more complex layouts we have to deal with. This is an Arabic manuscript, and as you can see, it has this sort of star formation, if you like, for the glosses, and it can handle that perfectly well. I can zoom in and out, I can see that it's there, and I can also do my transcription, so it automatically adjusts the direction, keeping in mind, recognizing that it's right to left, and I can go through there and edit even with this complex layout. So at this point we have our transcription. I might want also, I mentioned the ontology layout and so on. So just to pause that for a second, here on the left, you can see suddenly we have all this extra metadata. This was imported directly through the IIIF. So I can add more metadata here if I want. And here on the right, we have a default typology of regions and lines, which I can change and do whatever I want with. But just to show you how that works again, I can go into my page here. And I might want to train the machine to recognize that this section, for instance, is an illustration and therefore should not be automatically annotated, for instance. Or maybe I want to find these automatically. So I can simply switch to region mode, select my region, speed that up again, and then go up here and I have my list and I can say, okay, here we have illustration. And similarly over here, I can annotate the sections of text and select main to say main text and continue throughout the different pages of my manuscript. After I've done that, I can then come back and automatically train, for instance, the system by selecting all the images that I want to use, go to train, and here we have segmenter, in other words, to train the machine to find the different regions. And again, I can upload and create a new model, upload an existing one, or use an existing one in the system. And I can do the same thing for the HDR, for the text. This is where we actually do the transcription based on something that I've already, a transcription I've already prepared. And sorry, that jumped ahead a little bit, but here we have the export afterwards, where I can take my transcription and export it to be used in my work after that. So here's an example, another example of layout. This is a Hebrew manuscript with a moderately complex layout, I'd say. So we can see the regions that have been recognized. These numbers show you the reading order of the lines, which you can also adjust and train, just to give another example of the sorts of material that we deal with regularly. Here we have, just to show you again the import, we have the images. We can also import the transcriptions. And you can, as I've shown, export already. I showed you that very quickly just before. There it is again to see the different options, Alto, XML. We will be adding TEI as well. And then you simply download from the train, as we've already seen. Again, select different models here and create my own new model that I then want perhaps to save, to work with, to export, and whatever. And then when I've done that, I can also, from here, then go, and you can see here the models that I have already in the system for segmentation, for recognizing, which, as I say, I can export, I can download them from there, send them to my colleagues, publish them on Zenodo, do whatever I might like with them after that. A couple more examples here. So again, quite a difficult case. In Hebrew, a fragment not in very good condition, as you can see, but it's actually managed perfectly well with enough training data to find the text, which already is not easy, and produce a completely automatic transcription. Another example here, this is a Syriac manuscript in 3 columns in this case. And again, as long as you have a properly trained model, you can get very good results. So here again, just to show you a bit more clearly, if you can read Syriac, you can check the quality of the transcription. And again, to show that for different scripts, for different directionalities and so on, we're perfectly used to handling that. So that gives you an idea of eScriptorium and how it works. I want to talk now just for a couple of minutes on where resilience fits into this, because this is a resilience webinar talking about the European infrastructure that we're putting in place for religious studies. Now, in part, resilience is funding the work on eScriptorium, and as I say, it is still a work in progress for sure. It is already available for you to download and run yourself. So some of you may have tried to go to eScriptorium.fr and try to log in there. If you've done that, you'll have discovered that actually it doesn't work particularly well. It doesn't work, you can't access it, it's closed. So what's happening here? Well, as I say, the software is available for you to download and install on your own computer. You're extremely welcome to do that right now. However, realistically, if you just have a normal laptop like I do, or even a relatively good desktop computer, it's still not really feasible in practice to run, just because if you have hundreds of images at decent resolution, it's going to take a really, really long time, and you're going to bog down your computer with this processing, potentially for days or even weeks, which, as I say, is maybe possible, but usually isn't feasible. So how do you do this? Well, you need high-performance computers generally. You need GPUs. Maybe you have one at home, but that's pretty unlikely for most people in the humanities. So what do? You can talk to your institution. You may well have access to GPUs. They're probably not set up in a way that you want to use them, though. Usually they're designed for scientists with big batches that they send off with a reasonable degree of computing knowledge. Run this process. You probably want a nice interface. You probably want to be able to test things, go back and forth with training and testing and seeing the results and so on, which is generally not easy to do. And to set it up yourself, again, you can, but it's not cheap. We are doing this at the moment in Paris, and the costs can be 10,000 a year just for the electricity, let alone a couple of $100,000 for the computing and all the rest. So for most of us, this just isn't going to happen, right? If you're in the humanities, it's very, very difficult to get this sort of money. So if you have access to that, brilliant. You can do that right now. You can use it. Part of the idea of resilience, though, is to build up a European infrastructure, which includes the computers, the high-performance computing, the GPUs, the eScriptorium they're running for you to come and use directly. So if your institution is a member of Resilience, then very soon we hope you will be able to, as I say, log on, get an account, log in, and actually use this. Otherwise, you'll need to find another way to install the software. So again, it's completely open source, it's completely available now. There's just the question of whether or not your computer's big enough and powerful enough to use it. Now, I've mentioned again that we can, one of the real strengths, I think, of eScriptorium is that not only is the software open, but the models are open. So if in 5 years' time, well, Resilience, I think it's very unlikely, will not be running, but if you have a local setup, for instance, your system, you run out of money, whatever, you're using a system where they suddenly have to start charging money and you can't afford it, whatever the situation is, if the eScriptorium, you can get not only your data out, but you can get your models out. So for instance, so just to come back here, one very real possibility, which we do sometimes, is you can run eScriptorium on a relatively low power computer to do the interface stuff, export it, send it to somebody else to do the training on their powerful computer. They can then send the model back to you and you can install it in your eScriptorium. We're also building up open repositories and models so that if you do your work in Syriac or whatever it is, you can publish your model. I can then come and use that for my work. I can improve it. I can then republish it so that we can all benefit from what we're doing rather than retraining over and over at different systems. But that does create some challenges, some questions. And these are interesting research questions, I think, which we'd be very happy to discuss, and there are people working on this. But we're getting to the point where we really need to do quite a lot on this now. So which transcription standards we use? We all have different transcription standards, right? It depends on our text, it depends on what type of edition we want to create. Can we find a standard where we can agree on that? Yeah, probably, to a point. There's things like the Leiden standard, there's the TI, there are other options. But there are an awful lot of details we need to agree on if we're going to share models. When you're segmenting, do you mark baselines? Do you mark top lines? If you're writing in Hebrew, for instance. What about columns if it's vertical Chinese? What is the baseline in a vertical top-to-bottom text? Do you have rectangular or polygonal regions? What is your typology of regions and so on? These are very real questions. For instance, if you're moving between, say, Transcribus and eScriptorium, you can do that. You can't get your models out of Transcribus, but you can get your content and import it into eScriptorium. But there are interesting details around the standards that are used there, and how we manage them is not easy. Not to mention which images were used, or which scripts, what variety of scribal hands, and so on. If I want to reuse your data, if you want to reuse my models rather, I need to understand, we'll need to understand exactly how these have been trained to see to what degree they may or may not be useful. So I strongly encourage you to join these discussions if you're interested in this. ACRD is just one. There's HDR United is another of the various projects that are building up in different domains to say probably we can't agree across all manuscripts, but at least in specific subject areas we may be able to do this. But just to show a couple of quick examples of the sorts of things we need to deal with. So writing line and direction. As I say, Hebrew you would normally is in a sense from a top line. Chinese is in columns. There isn't really a line. If it's something like Mongolian, then it's vertical, top to bottom, although top to bottom, left to right, not top to bottom, right to left. And in a sense, it does have a line of writing. Sometimes you have bottom to top. This is an old Chinese example, clockwise on coins and so on. And then you get some really fun ones like these. So trying to find standards for recording this type of data in such a way that we can share and reuse it is by no means straightforward, and a very interesting question, probably not one that we're going to solve very soon though. So thank you very much. That's as I say, a view of eScriptorium, view of Kraken, an idea of where we're going, an idea of some of the questions and challenges and things we need to work with. And here we have a number of links for more details, including the source code of both Kraken and eScriptorium, as well as some discussions and repositories of models and so on. So again, many thanks for the funding sources from PSL, the EU from Resilience, and many thanks to you for listening. I hope to hear from you soon about how you're going with actually using the system. Thank you.